Hi there, and welcome to another one of my classic reviews, where I pick one of my all-time favourite movies, give it a rewatch, and then come review it. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Monty Python's Life of Brian. Monty Python is the famous comedy troupe from Britain, made up of John Cleese, Michael Palin, Terry Jones, Terry Gilliam, Graham Chapman, and Eric Idle. And Life of Brian is, to me, the Pythons at the peak of their comedy. Whilst I think it's a film that's equally as good as Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and that film is certainly probably the funnier of the two, I think Life of Brian is their most substantial work. They came from sketch comedy and television, and then Monty Python and the Holy Grail was basically a sketch film, a very loose narrative. And after Life of Brian, they subsequently went back to sketches. But Life of Brian is the only film that feels like a full narrative, that feels like just one big sketch, as opposed to being a sketch like as the previous films. Now obviously Life of Brian still has each scene basically playing as a sketch, but it does all interconnect in a way that's much cleverer than they usually did, and they actually seem to pay attention to some kind of story here, although obviously it's all in service of jokes. So the first thing about Life of Brian is the reason it's a classic is quite simply, it's fucking hilarious. And it's really funny all the way through. Every single joke pretty much lands. And the jokes are very varied. The Pythons were known for their sophisticated silliness and the way that they would be very silly, but also play with a veneer of cleverness. In fact, the whole thing is just very witty. All the lines are witty, there's so many great moments, the setups are good, the whole extended joke about Latin grammar is very funny, but at the same time they also are very crude and immature. I mean, the whole joke about the name Biggest Dickus is just as funny, even though that's obviously way less intelligent as a joke. But this is what the Pythons were able to do. They were able to get jokes from anywhere they could. They even get jokes in the film from on-screen text. A time frame is listed as being about tea time. They very much use comedy at any opportunity to get what they wanted across. And the performances are all really great. They all service the jokes really well. One thing that makes the Pythons really great is that the actors play the scenes pretty naturalistically. They act in a fairly natural manner. They aren't leaving pause for people to laugh. They aren't trying to be the centre of attention. Each character plays their character very straight. They play it as if they were actually just in this scenario, but ignoring the ridiculousness of any setup that they provide. And so that's what makes Life of Brian so incredibly funny, not to mention the fact that there's a huge number of fantastic scenes and fantastic jokes here. I mean, what have the Romans ever done for us is a great joke. And there's some fantastic lines as well that are just classic and quotable. Lines like, "He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy," or "I'm Brian and so's my wife." And lines like this which are just constantly memorable. The entire final section to do with crucifixion is brilliant. It has this whole bureaucracy around crucifixion which is funny, and then you get like the way that Brian is abandoned by a bunch of different people who all abandon him for various funny reasons, and he becomes an unwilling martyr. I think the best of those is the crack suicide squad, who actually just kill themselves and do nothing. And I also love the way the film ends on the song "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life," which is just a classic song that's really memorable, really light-hearted, whole bunch of fun, and so the perfect ironic song to juxtapose over the image of people dying a horrible death. And that's exactly what the Pythons were able to do, and it's brilliant, and I just love thinking of those scenes. I'm literally fucking smiling now, which is weird because I'm the worst at that kind of thing. And this is, yeah, it's hilarious and I love it. It's obviously not all PC, and I certainly think Life of Brian is an offensive comedy for a fair amount of its runtime. The film also has some substance to it. It has two basic levels of satirical attack, which is why this is a bit deeper than something like Holy Grail, which has no satire really within it. Life of Brian has two sort of prongs of satire. The less obvious one is it's an attack on left-wing politics of the era. In 70s Britain you get a lot of trade union power, you get a lot of socialism around, and there's also just in the 70s generally a rise of revolutionary left-wing groups. You have the rise of like guerrilla terrorist groups in places like West Germany, for example. And the film is an attack of all these ethnic groups who have really long acronyms, silly names, and there's loads of infighting. They all hate each other, even though they're all meant to be on the same side. They have these minor differences, and that alone makes them dislike each other. I mean, the film has the People's Front of Judea, the Judean People's Front, the Judean Popular People's Front, which ironically has just one member, and the whole infighting is really well done and really funny. One bit that I always think is great is when two of the groups are fighting and Brian says they should fight against a common enemy, and they both, rather than thinking of the Romans, instantly go, "The Judean People's Front?" Which I think is fantastic, and that's exactly the level of satire this film's getting at. It's these leftists who were idealistic, who only ever talked and planned and voted, and never actually got around to doing any action whatsoever. And that's just brilliant. I think that's really funny, and obviously people fighting against oppression isn't a bad thing, but they can obviously be mocked, and it's just really funny in how it's done here. Obviously though, the biggest target of Life of Brian, and the reason the film is so controversial, is its attack on religion. Its scathing attack on particularly Christianity and Judaism, And yeah, like, it certainly goes out there, and I have no problem with that because it's comedy. I mean, comedy is comedy is comedy, it's a joke. I don't think how offensive it is, even if I can acknowledge that it is offensive in parts, but I actually think the film is relatively tame. For starters, it doesn't offend Jesus. Jesus is always seen in the distance. Jesus is always completely separate and respectfully shown. But what the film relies on is stupid humans, stupid people who use religion. There's some jokes here which just aren't even anti-religious. I mean, the idea of people on Sermon on the Mount mishearing things and getting into a fight. I mean, that's not even, that's just light mockery. That's just funny. What if they did fall out? What if they did have an argument? What if they did genuinely mishear stuff? Or even just other minor things that he mocks. I mean, he certainly goes out there. He certainly attacks dogmatic and arbitrary aspects of religion. Stuff like stoning, which is something that even happens to this day, and the film openly mocks how silly that is. And more specifically, when Brian himself becomes a godlike figure, it certainly mocks the way that people become tribal and the way that people become religious and have an identity and they find religion interpretation for anything. It becomes one great big confirmation bias. Whatever Brian says, it convinces them they are the Messiah. There's even a line to do with the idea that only a true Messiah would deny being a Messiah. It's that kind of thing which the film is attacking, the religious people who believe stuff too dogmatically and who can't ever be convinced of anything else. And maybe it's a harsh attack. I'm not disputing that the film certainly is not particularly sensitive to people who are religious, and it is definitely a bit harsh in parts, but at the same time, I don't really give a shit. It's funny, and that's all the film needs to be. The fact that it also is legitimately about human tribalism and about how humans are, the fact that humans will always fight with each other, and the fact that humans always define their identity by stupid other things, is just a brilliant little satirical point. I mean, the whole thing with the whole crowd of people declaring it as one. Yes, we are individuals. I mean, that's just what it is. That's just what modern religion is. I mean, in the era of capitalism and individualism, so many people basically just do what their religious teachings tell them. They don't think for themselves. And that's a legitimate point. It's not necessarily a statement on whether or not that's good or bad, but it's true that, like, collectivism does exist and people are tribal, and that does build up. And that's a really funny point that the film brings up, and is funnily done. Now, the film was obviously greatly written, it has great performances. It certainly is lacking in terms of the direction. It's not the most inspired direction of all time. The set design is actually really good, but I certainly don't think Life of Brian is a masterpiece in terms of how well made it is. But in terms of just being a funny film that delivers laughs, delivers a good satirical through line, and also just works, is entertaining from beginning to end, I think it just really, really is fantastic. And although it certainly is out there and offensive at times, it actually could have been more offensive. I mean, they actually cut out an entire subplot to do with a Zionist whose ideology was paralleled by Nazism, which is certainly a pretty out there statement for a film to make, and the Pythons cut that because the Monty Python team thought, yeah, no, that's too far, which I think is interesting. I think it's interesting to note that they could have gone more offensive than they did. And as a result, I think it's interesting to see that in the end they focused the film. Life of Brian is Monty Python the most focused. It's a film which they tightly constructed, they made funny, every joke lands, and they basically just made sure that it works as a whole. I think it's one of the finest comedies ever made. I think it's brilliantly satirical and just really wickedly funny. And I think it's just an entertaining blast from beginning to end. Obviously, being British, I have a slight bias, but I do really love British comedy. And in my opinion, Life of Brian is one of the finest examples of British comedy. So that's what I think of Life of Brian. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've seen it, so please leave me a comment. If you like this review, please give it a like. If you want to hear more of my reviews, you can subscribe. If you want to read more of my reviews, you can follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter, links in the description. And thank you for watching.